fellow assassins, to another episode of the Dark Assassins podcast, the show that dives deep into not just technology, but the concepts, software, and procedures behind it all, and explains it so simply that even your grandma can understand it. As always, I'm your host, the Dark Assassin. That's right, we are back with another episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Now, this episode is going to be a bit of a roller coaster of an episode because we got some very low lows and we got some, I guess, potentially high highs. Well, I guess maybe just one. But the lows are kind of big oofs because we have a legend in the technology sphere from the 90s and 2000s finally going the way of the dodo bird. I mean, it's if you've been keeping an eye on this company for a while, it's kind of been happening for, I don't know, probably the past like decade-ish, maybe decade and a half. But then, of course, Cisco just couldn't help themselves and decided to have another perfect 10 out of 10 CVE, which, of course, we have to talk about because that's what we do here now, apparently. And also, we have to talk about the upcoming Apple event. And no, that wasn't the only reason that I decided to record this week. As you could see, there's a lot of other stuff we're going to be talking about. And then just a bit of an observation / rant about AI in the automotive industry that I've just had some experiences with in the past few weeks, and I just figured I'd talk about it. But before we get into all that good stuff, let's start off with our trivia question for the week. So this week's trivia question is: the first device to use Apple Silicon was the iPad back in 2010, followed by the iPhone 4 in the same year. So what was the name of that chip? So what was the name of the chip that was in the iPad and iPhone 4? And that is your trivia question for the week. Now, before we jump into the cybersecurity tip, let's talk some cybersecurity news. That, of course, being Cisco's latest and greatest 10 out of 10 CVE. Now, in fairness, this didn't just happen this week. This actually happened let's see, when did that happen? A couple weeks ago. So granted, it's a little bit old news, but of course we haven't talked about it yet, so of course we have to. So they announced, so they pushed an update. So of course, if you do have Cisco, of course you better be sure that you're updating your systems. But they pushed a security update to address a maximum security flaw in the Secure Firewall Management Center that could allow an attacker to execute arbitrary code on the affected systems. So a successful exploit of this vulnerability could allow the attacker to execute commands at a high privilege level. Obviously, it's a perfect 10. That's kind of how it goes with these things. This vulnerability to be exploited, Cisco Secure FMC, which is that Secure Firewall Management Center. They said that the software is configured in Radius, which I guess is their web-based management interface, SSH management, or both. So I guess you could configure it either way. So the funny thing is in the article that I have linked in the show notes, there's a bunch of other CVEs listed in there as well. But I guess the good news is it doesn't appear that the flaw has been exploited in the wild, at least as of yet. But definitely make sure that you're up to date, of course. So basically, I guess how this works is according to this article that I'll have linked in the show notes, quote, the networking equipment major, that being Cisco, said the issue stems from a lack of proper handling of user input during the authentication phase, as a result of which the attacker could send specifically crafted input when entering credentials that get authenticated at the configured Radius server. So again, this is another instance of Cisco neglecting to or failing to properly parse user input. This is kind of secure programming 101. You never trust user input. Now, I'm not entirely sure what we need to do with Cisco to get them to actually. I don't think behave themselves is the right word, but write some more secure software. I'm not entirely sure what we have to do at this point. I don't know if this is a lack of unit testing, a lack of integration testing. I'm not entirely sure, but there is definitely some areas that could be improved when it comes to the software being pumped out by the Cisco house. So yeah, so of course, because we were kind of on a roll there for a while, always talking about the latest Cisco vulnerabilities, I figured it was worth talking about again because this is another very terrible one. I mean, a perfect 10 out of 10 with not propping user input properly and getting arbitrary code execution as root essentially is literally as bad as it gets. So, yeah. So again, RIP Cisco. If you do have any Cisco devices, definitely be sure you're keeping those up to date, because you never know when the update that's potentially came out is patching a 10 out of 10 CVE, which I guess over the past few months has been a pretty common occurrence, unfortunately, for those that have Cisco devices. But with that, let's get into this week's cybersecurity tip. So, this week's cybersecurity tip is to never get comfortable with your current cybersecurity approach. Now, this is for a couple reasons. One being discomfort often comes from either facing new challenges, adapting to evolving threats, or stepping outside your comfort zone for different things. So, generally, when you get comfortable, you're kind of used to the situation that you're in. And especially in the cybersecurity world, that can lead to things like complacency, and you think that your solution is perfect, which it obviously never is. But and the other thing too is we talk so frequently about how quickly the cybersecurity landscape changes and how quickly new threats are coming out, how frequently new malware is coming out. I mean, this stuff is evolving all the time and it is a non-stop arms race. So if you get comfortable thinking that your current solution is as good as it's going to get and it can't get better, that's where you're essentially just asking yourself to potentially get hacked because you're not keeping up with the latest trends, what the latest malware is, what the latest vulnerabilities and exploits are, and making sure that you're up to date on all that stuff. The other thing, too, is if you get complacent, you might miss out on some new things that come out in the industry. Like maybe there's some new encryption methods that come out. I mean, nowadays we're seeing more and more quantum resistant cryptography algorithms coming out. So if you're still hard set in your ways of using RSA, maybe you want to look into some of these more quantum resistant algorithms to improve your cybersecurity strategy. And just in general, staying up to date on like cybersecurity news, what's going on with the latest threats and vulnerabilities. I mean, we literally just talked about one a couple minutes ago with the whole Cisco thing. So staying up to date on all that stuff, because if you, especially if you know what infrastructure and what services you're running in your either your home lab or your enterprise or business or whatever, that can help you to better stay on top of these things. And we talked about that a few episodes ago for the cybersecurity tip, basically making like a list of all of the different services that you run in order to essentially keep track of those kinds of things and to better inform yourself when you might need to patch an emergent vulnerability or something like that. And also, it's also good to be uncomfortable too, because when a cybersecurity incident goes down, like if you get hacked or ransomware gets deployed or something like that, you definitely aren't going to be comfortable. It's going to be a very stressful situation. So if you're not used to, kind of stressing out about things, that might be a little overwhelming for you and just potentially make the situation worse. So there's a couple ways that you can kind of help combat this. One is doing like pen testing or red teaming against your system or services. Obviously, you can't really know about it, because if you know about it, that kind of defeats the purpose. But if that's something that your company does, like having doing routine pen tests and red teaming things to intentionally find vulnerabilities without necessarily letting the team know. So the team could potentially see that, oh, someone just accessed our system without, the proper authentication, means this is potentially a big problem, and kind of get them used to, responding to those kinds of security incidents. Will help them in the event that some actual security incident actually takes place. It's kind of like doing a fire drill, back when you were in grade school. If every time you hear the fire alarm go off, you just think it's a fire drill, and it's no big deal. In the event that a fire actually goes on, you're probably a little more likely to act calm. Now, the teachers might be a little freaked out because they probably knew the fire drill schedule, and knowing that there wasn't one scheduled and hearing the alarm go off might be a little alarming to them. But as far as like from the kids' perspective, you never really know when the fire drills are going to happen. So as far as you're concerned, it's just, another Tuesday essentially. So that would be one other thing about kind of helping you to handle the pressure, is, having some type of pen test or red teaming or something like that going on your against your service, to test yourself, to make sure that you are able to handle things in the event that a potential cybersecurity event takes place. So yeah, don't get too comfortable, because if you do, that's how you get complacent. And then when something goes wrong, you're probably more likely to freak out and just make things worse, rather than just jumping immediately into what the issue is and trying to get it solved. So that is your cybersecurity tip for the week. So before we get into the nerdy things, we have to pour one out for America Online, aka AOL, because this month they officially pulled the plug on their dial-up service. So if you haven't heard of AOL, you probably didn't grow up in the 90s or early 2000s, or were around in the early stages of the internet. But back in the day, AOL was a very, very big deal, and I think that's kind of putting it mildly. They kind of dominated the tech industry back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and AOL was absolutely where it's at. One thing that is still, I think, fantastic is every now and again, when I'll go somewhere and I'll have to give whoever's at the reception desk like my email, like when I stay at hotels and stuff. They'll ask me what my email is, and every now and then when I give them the AOL email address, they'll think it's like the coolest thing ever, because of course everyone nowadays seems to be on like the mainstream bandwagon of just using Gmail, which I don't know. I never got behind that bandwagon. Although also I have trust issues with Google, so that maybe that's part of it as well. But yeah, it's definitely a throwback, and especially nowadays, most people don't really have AOL email addresses anymore. I mean, some people still do, um, but it's not necessarily as common as what it used to be. So yeah, after more than 30 years, AOL's dial-up service is finally going the way of the dodo bird. And it's kind of a bummer, because they were, basically the way that most people got on the internet, really before like broadband really made it to the masses. And whenever, because I mean, that's how you got online, was through dial up. And most people just used AOL for that. And AOL was basically the largest internet service provider, at least in the United States. And I think most people that were around at the time probably remember like all the CDs and floppy disks and stuff that were floating around for AOL. One thing that I did that I thought was pretty fun, was I got myself I think it was a AOL desktop version like 2.5 or something on like a floppy disk, and installed it in like MS-DOS, I think, or maybe it was Windows 3.1 virtual machine, and got it up and running, which was pretty cool. And I have to say, AOL Desktop, I mean, that obviously died years ago, but that was fantastic. And then, of course, we can't forget the AIM Messenger. I mean, that was an absolute blast. I mean, how many times? I mean, I have fond memories of hearing, the opening door sound. When someone enters like a chat room or something. AIM was so good. AOL Desktop was so good. AOL was good. So it's definitely a bummer that their dial-up service is going the way of the dinosaurs, but I can't imagine that in 2025, many people are still making use of that service. I can't imagine that it's a very profitable business model for them anymore. Since I think at this point, most people are either using some kind of like satellite if they're like way out in the boonies, or they just have like broadband, or something. Because even if you don't have like an actual broadband connection around you, you could get something like Starlink, which would be significantly faster than dial up. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a surprise that it's going away, since it's not like you're going to be getting blazing fast speeds anyway with dial-up. That's never what it was intended for. But it's still definitely sad that it's going away. Now AOL still technically exists. Like, you can still go to AOL.com and stuff. They still have email that they provide. I'm pretty sure they still have like an ads business of some sort, and they still have search, of course. So they're not like dead, but they are by no means the powerhouse that they once were back uh, in the 90s and early 2000s. So I saw that article come up, and it did make me kind of sad on the inside. So RIP to AOL dial-up services. Well, now with that, let's get into what nerdy stuff have I been up to this week. Now, I get that I should probably change the jingle there, because if this podcast isn't really going to be a weekly thing anymore, I guess that kind of defeats the purpose of saying this week. But we're just going to keep rolling with it because that's how it's always been. But between last episode and this episode, I got the implementation that I was trying to work on, so previously I had a function created that would basically be able to draw elements in a grid, rather than having the multiple implementations of that functionality throughout a couple different places in the code base. So I got that working, but I wasn't fully happy with it because of how many parameters this function had to take in, and it was getting very cumbersome very quickly. So I opted to basically just create a basic struct to contain all of the possible parameters that one could use for this function, and then just pass that struct as a variable to the function itself, and then it can do whatever it needs to. And this allows for way more customization, way more flexibility, because if I ever need to change anything, I can literally just change the struct and change the function, but I don't have to worry about changing how the function's called anywhere, which is very, very nice. And the other thing that's also nice too, is this allowed me to make things a lot more dynamic as well. So I didn't have to. Well, I guess I could have done it that way before, but it would have been way more cumbersome. Basically, the ability to add more than just two columns. I could have as many columns as I wanted to. I have that functionality baked in there. And it would have been feasible with the old approach of just doing like functions, with passing everything in as a parameter, but it would definitely have been a lot more cumbersome, especially to set up. um, Now the setup process is basically you just create an instance of the struct, set the values to what you want them to be, and then you pass the struct in to the function, which still may not necessarily be the cleanest of clean solutions, but it's still, I think, a heck of a lot better than what it was, because I do have defaults set for certain things. So if you just don't feel like wanting to set something, you can just keep it at whatever the default is. And I did test it, make sure it's working. It does work as intended, so you can set multiple different colors. You can have multiple different columns. It's working out pretty well. I think the only thing that I really need to do now is get it fo- fit into like the battle screen and get it implemented into the bag menu as well. But those two are a little bit of a different case because you also have to have like the selection arrow to select what option you want. So I'm going to have to write some additional code, I think, to actually get that functionality working, because drawing the options isn't going to be the issue. There's a function that exists now to do it. But getting the arrow to work with that new functionality will probably take a little bit of refactoring. But the nice thing is the save screen, which was basically being my guinea pig for all this, works exactly like it did before I started out on this endeavor. So that's how you know that you did a really good job with your refactor, when you can't notice a difference. Everything works exactly the same, but the code is a heck of a lot cleaner and you reduced redundancy. That's pretty much the definition of a good refactor. Now, I think the only way that you could notice a difference in a refactor is if you actually were refactoring for performance improvements, which in this case I wasn't doing. But in that case, if you were going for performance improvements, then you technically would want to see a difference in how the code operates. Now, functionally, it would still be the same. It would just function a bit quicker. But yeah, so that was definitely a very good refactor, considering that the functionality didn't change whatsoever, but the actual code significantly was improved, became way more reusable, and just more usable in general. So I am considering that a very big win. Now we have to talk about Apple's announcement this week, which actually did happen this week. It wasn't like the previous two stories that happened earlier in the month. So Apple announced their September event called Awe Dropping. Um, Now, considering that this is their normal September event, which they have scheduled for September 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, or 1 p.m. Eastern time, we can basically guarantee that this is going to be for iPhones. I guess technically speaking, we can't because they haven't unveiled anything yet, but I think it's pretty safe to say, given their track record, for what they unveil at September events, that this is going to be an iPhone and iPhone adjacent event. So the rumors, if they are to be believed, suggest that we're going to be getting the iPhone 17, iPhone 17 Pro, and iPhone 17 Pro Max. The notable omission there is the Plus model, and unfortunately for the mini fans out there, based on rumors, it doesn't appear that the Plus model is being yanked for the Mini to make a triumphant return. Instead, it seems like they're going to be releasing a new phone called the iPhone 17 Air, which, based on the rumors, is supposed to be the thinnest and lightest iPhone that Apple has ever produced. And it will replace the Plus model, which I think this is going to be rather interesting to see how this plays out, because the last time that Apple introduced a super thin and light phone was the iPhone 6, and we all know how that how that turned out with the whole bend gate thing. So it'll be interesting to see that this being the new thinnest and lightest iPhone, if it suffers from a similar bend gate type scandal, I guess, if you will. So you'll probably definitely want to be tuning into like the Jerry Rig Everything channel, because he will almost certainly be trying to do bend testing on it. And I'm sure a lot of other creators as well are going to try to bend this thing to see if this is actually Bendgate 2.0. But the display is supposedly going to be a 6.6-inch display. It's going to have Apple's C1 modem, which they debuted in the iPhone 16e earlier this year. It's supposed to have a single lens camera on the back, so similar to like the iPhone SE line and the 16e. Now, one thing that we should not expect in this event, unfortunately, is a cameo slash appearance from the most legendary man in the technology industry. That, of course, being our boy Air Force One, aka Craig Federighi. Because unfortunately, this isn't the WWDC software focused event. And typically, Craig does not make appearances in events that aren't WWDC. So if he does make an appearance, we will all be pleasantly surprised, and I will absolutely be making a note of it. But I don't think that he will, which is unfortunate, but also at the same time not unexpected. The other things that, according to the rumors, are supposedly going to be unveiled are new Apple Watches, a new AirPods Pro update, and refreshes to the HomePod Mini and the Apple TV. Now, when I heard about the possible update to the AirPods Pro line, I was a little intrigued because it's been a hot minute since Apple made an update to AirPods Pro. AirPods Pro 2 have been out for a while now. The AirPods Pro I have are the original ones. I mean, they still work perfectly fine. Maybe the battery life's a little, maybe it's not quite as good as it was before. I mean, generally, I still don't have issues with the battery life. I generally don't use them that long. The only times where they really get tested are when I take like airplane flights, whenever I go on a flight. There have been a couple instances where the battery life on them was basically reduced from 100 to 0 between the time where I put them in on the flight to when I was, kind of. Granted, I think they did last the entirety of the flight, but they didn't necessarily last all the way up until I decided to take them out, like walking through the terminal. So there have been a couple instances where the battery life probably didn't last as long as it could have been, which I mean makes sense. I've had them for probably at least. I've had them since before the AirPods Pro 2 came out, so whenever that was, plus maybe like an extra year or so. So I don't know, maybe 3, 4 years, something like that, if I had to guess. Four at the 4 or 5, I don't know. It's been a while. So depending on what this update is, depending on what the refresh is supposed to be, it might tempt me to upgrade because based on what I've heard from just the AirPods Pro 1 to 2, there's apparently a pretty no I get maybe a noticeable difference in like the noise cancellation and the audio quality, and I would assume those improvements would continue into the next generation. So I think there would probably be more of a noticeable difference to me if I did upgrade, especially in the noise cancellation and the audio quality department. So it might convince me to update. Plus, also, I guess the improved battery life. So we'll see what I end up deciding to do. But that's probably the only thing that I'll actually possibly upgrade to. My phone still works fine. Granted, the battery life isn't quite as good as it used to be. I mean, I think it's the iPhone 13, so I've had it. I basically got it when it debuted, so it's been a few years. I guess we're coming up on 4 years now. But I mean, I still have no issues getting through the day with plenty of battery to spare. I just noticed that with my limited use, the battery is draining more than it did when I first got it. Like when I first got it, like there were days where I could easily go through the entire day and not even use 10% of the battery. Now with similar use, I can basically go the whole day, and I think maybe I get down into like the maybe like 80s or maybe 70s if I'm using it more than usual. Like still plenty of room to spare. So I don't think I will be upgrading. Plus, I don't notice any kind of performance hits. I don't. I just don't really have a reason to upgrade. I did tell myself that I would upgrade my phone whenever they got rid of the notch, which then the dynamic island came out with the iPhone 14, and then I was like, I'll just wait till they get rid of the whole dynamic island thing and it's just a clear pane of glass, which I don't know. At this point, I think I don't know if my phone will even be supported software wise by the time that happens. So I might actually be forced to upgrade, but I guess we'll see. So what else? So yeah, allegedly, The AirPods Pro 3, I guess, according to rumors, are supposedly going to have an updated design. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I'm not really sure what they can really do to improve the design unless they like maybe do something with the stem to like reduce it and make it smaller or something. I don't know. So I guess we'll be interested to see what happens there. But yeah, the Apple event is coming up, so it won't be next week, but it will be the week after that on September 9th. That's a Tuesday. So definitely get your popcorn ready and tune in. And you can basically pencil in that we will be having an episode that following weekend to recap the event and kind of talk about the various things that got released and all that good stuff. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode was artificial intelligence in the automotive industry, specifically when it deals with self driving cars. Now, I currently live in an area where self driving cars are actually a thing. Like, there are self driving taxis. It's very peculiar to see them driving around. Now, I haven't had any issues with them. Now, I know there was a very, very hilarious story. Maybe, I think it was maybe a couple years ago. Not where I live, but I think it was in LA. There was like a story of like the Waymos like setting each other's like car alarms off, and everyone was getting mad at them, which was kind of hilarious. But the main issue, I don't, that's kind of its own separate can of worms, but in the same vein of self driving, even your standard car basically has some version of self driving in it. Now, I'll have a link in the show notes to like the different levels of self driving. Um, but as long as your car has some form of cruise control, your car has some level of autonomy when it comes to its self-driving capabilities. Now, obviously the dumb cruise control, as some people like to say, the one where you just set the speed and your car always goes that speed, that would essentially be your level 1, self levels of self-driving. If you have no cruise control whatsoever, that would be level 0, which is none. And then the kind of the next step up from that is level 2, which in addition to, being able to adjust your speed dynamically, it also will kind of like steer for you and keep you in your lane and all that stuff. Now, the car, so I have one of the cars that I have does have this level 2 self-driving, and I have to say, I'm not a fan. I've been using it for a while, the past few weeks, and there are some things about it that just really, really grind my gears. Now, don't get me wrong, it is very nice that I can be driving on the highway and I can be kept centered in my lane. I don't really have to worry too much, and I don't have to worry about ramming into the back of another person's car, because if they start slowing down, my car will detect that and slow down so I don't ram into the back of them. So that is very nice. It'll also alert me, like if I'm coming up too fast on someone, it'll kind of like beep at me and stuff. And it has these features, and at times I must attest that they can be nice to have. However, there are some other gripes that I do not like about them. One being, it is, in my opinion, it is worse for your fuel economy. Now, don't get me wrong, cruise control in general is bad for your fuel economy because it doesn't understand the concept of hills. But also, it's bad for your fuel economy, the adaptive cruise control compared to the dumb cruise control, in the sense that you cannot pass with the adaptive cruise control. Now, yes, technically you can, but the problem is, I experienced this on numerous occasions where when you have your cruise control set, you're going to be slowly creeping up on the person in front of you. And unless you're monitoring your speed very closely, there's a good chance that your car will start slowly creeping up to them, assuming you have this dynamic cruise control thing that'll auto adjust your speed. What'll happen is you'll slowly start creeping up on this car, and then slowly but surely the distance between you and them gets less and less until you're just always a constant distance behind them. And up until that point, you're like, oh, okay, I'll wait till I get a little bit closer to them, and then I'll hit my turn signal and go past them. But then you get to the point where you're like, oh, I guess maybe they sped up or something, and I'm not going to be able to pass them. And then you look down at your speedometer, and you're doing five less than what you have your cruise control set to, and you're like, oh. So then you hit your turn signal, go over, and then the car speeds back up. So yes, you can still pass, but it's not the very smooth, and this is why it's worse for fuel economy too, because the number one way to kill your fuel economy in a car is by accelerating. And the one nice thing about the dumb cruise control is once you set it, there really is no accelerating. Now, yes, there is accelerating, like if you're going up a hill or something, or to maintain your speed. So, yes, that exists, but you're not going from a lower speed to back to what you were supposed to be going. So, with the dumb cruise control, you basically can ride up to as close as you want to the car in front of you, and then you can see like, oh yes, I am going to need to get around them. So then you can hit your turn signal, go around them, and maintain the same speed. You don't have to worry about adjusting it. So that was one of the most annoying things that I've had to deal with the adaptive cruise control, because I feel like I have to baby it so much to the point that, like, whenever I'm kind of sort of close to a car in front of me, I just turn it off because I know otherwise I'm just going to be sitting behind this car forever. Now, granted, there are indeed some times where you absolutely can tell that your car is slowing down. But if you're in one of those situations where the car in front of you is, say, doing, I don't know, say it's doing 65 and your car is doing, say, 67, you're not going to be flying past them, obviously. It's one of those passes where you're slowly but surely creeping past them. And if that's what your cruise control set at, and that's what their cruise control set at, if you're coming up behind them, you're probably not really going to notice the difference in your speed, that you're actually doing like a couple miles an hour less than what your cruise control is set at, unless you're really looking at your speedo. So it's really annoying. Now, granted, if they're doing, say, like 10 under what your cruise control set at, and you're kind of coming up behind them, yeah, you'll probably notice the car slowing down, in which case, oh yeah, I need to get over. But then still, you still slow down, so now you have to go, when you get over, you have to speed back up again, and it just kind of kills the fuel economy. But the other thing I've noticed is just, I mean, cruise control in general is pretty terrible at fuel economy. I mean, because it doesn't understand the concept of hills. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've, like, even the dumb cruise control, I had the cruise control set, and then I start going down a hill, and you can feel the car braking for you. And it's like, no, I don't want you to brake, because we have to go back up this hill. So you're basically wasting all this energy going down the hill by braking, that you then have to use an acceleration to go back up the hill. Like, if you really wanted to maximize your fuel economy there, you would either start accelerating a little bit and get that assist from going down the hill, so you're not having to put as much, extra throttle into it, so then you can get over the hill, or you could just simply coast down the hill to gain speed that way, and then, maintain or slowly reduce your speed back down to what you were doing as you go back up the hill, so you're not, having to floor it to get up the other side of the hill, because that's what kills your fuel economy. Now, I know from personal experience that whenever I drive with cruise control, whether it's the dynamic cruise control or the dumb cruise control, I always, always, always get worse fuel economy than when I just drive by myself. I don't, like I mentioned with the hill example, I don't think that's necessarily a surprise, but it is something worth noting. And I guess the other thing with the whole, like, lane keep assist stuff. Now, if you do have that on, um, the car will absolutely yell at you if you don't use your turn signal. So BMW drivers, definitely be aware of that. Because other if you don't use your turn signal, it will not only beep at you, but it'll also kind of like try to steer you back into the lane. Now, of course, you can override it, but it will be annoying for you BMW drivers that notoriously don't like to use your turn signals. Now, of course, that is a stereotype. I have seen BMW drivers use turn signals, but that, of course, is just the joke. Um, but like I think I mentioned this in previous episodes too when I went on one of these car rants, is something about the raw feel of, you being the one actually driving the car is very, very nice. I enjoy it very much. Now, don't get me wrong, if I'm just going straight down a highway, there's nobody around. Yeah, having the cruise control on so I can just kind of sit back and not have to really worry about anything is very nice. And having, the whole lane keep assist stuff so you really, really don't have to worry about anything. Now, of course, you still have to keep your hand on the wheel and all that good stuff. But you don't necessarily have to, be super focused on making sure the car is doing what you're expecting it to do. And you can kind of take a little bit of a brain break, if you will. You don't have to be like super hard focused and concentrated. But there are some times where you just want to have the cruise control set and you just want to keep going your speed. And when you get up close to someone, you can just hit the turn signal, go over, get past them, and get back over and not have to fiddle with the controls to make it so you don't slow down and have to speed back up. Just kind of a gripe that I've experienced over the past few weeks of driving with the adaptive cruise control. So just something that I figured I would bring up, and maybe some of you can sympathize, maybe you won't. I know some people absolutely love the dynamic cruise control, and if you don't care about necessarily maintaining the speed you set your cruise control at, and you're just full on along for the ride and you don't have a care in the world, then the adaptive cruise control is probably a pretty nice feature for you because you can literally just set it and forget it essentially. Because even if you're coming up on slower traffic, the car will just slow down for you. And then when traffic starts speeding back up, it'll speed back up for you. Now, would I necessarily recommend you have the dynamic cruise control set if there are a lot of stoplights around or when you're coming up to a stoplight? Absolutely not. But theoretically, if all the cars around you are slowing down and you have the cruise control set, your car should, in theory, slow down. And if they come to a stop, your car in theory should also come to a stop. And then as the cars in front of you start speeding up again, your car in theory should start speeding up again with them. Now, like I said, I wouldn't do that. I don't do that, but theoretically, I guess you could. I don't trust cars enough to do that. I like kind of being in control. I mean, you're in the driver's seat, I guess, for a reason. Um, Now, it also should be worth noting too, with some of the more like actual self-driving cars, like those self-driving taxis and stuff. Those generally are in like a geo-fenced area. So basically, what that means is the area they're allowed to navigate in has been like fully mapped out and everything for them. So they really know, what their driving conditions and what the roads and where they're going and all that. They know exactly what they're going to be up against. So it's not like they're driving in conditions that they've never been in before, because if you've ever dealt with AI before, you know that it's not necessarily the best when it encounters something that it's not expecting. And if you don't believe me, I know I've given this example many times before on the podcast, but if you think AI is this super intelligence overlord that's going to take everyone else's jobs, ask it start diving deep into questions that you're very, very knowledgeable on, and you will very quickly see that it is very dumb and will make things up. And it's just not very good. And it's the same thing with driving too, because if you have one of those cars that will center you in your lane, it loses its absolute mind if there are multiple lines on the road, like because of construction or something, and there's like lines painted over lines and you have to be the one to know where the correct line is. The car is going to have absolutely no idea what it's doing, and it's going to freak out, beep like crazy, try to turn you in places that you don't want to turn, and it is just not a fun time. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about it's good in conditions that it knows and areas that it's been trained for, but the second you get it outside of that and it doesn't really know what it's up against, like for instance, multiple lines going in different ways on a roadway under construction, it's not going to really have any idea what it's doing, and it's those are the types of conditions where it's really going to start to struggle. Now theoretically in the I guess the future world, um, if every single car was had, self-driving capabilities and we completely made it illegal to drive a car that wasn't computer controlled and they were all connected to each other, theoretically you wouldn't have to worry about traffic anymore or have any traffic lights because all the cars would be talking to each other all the time and they would basically never get into accidents and stuff. The only thing is that is a kind of a fantasy dream world that's I don't think that's ever going to happen, and if it does, I have some serious concerns. Um it's like the whole smart home thing of everything being connected to the cloud. I don't trust it. You can imagine the terrorist slash hacker scenario where someone is able to break into this self-driving car network, disrupt it, and basically cause mass havoc, crashes everywhere because the cars are no longer able to communicate with one another and coordinate their movements, and now everything starts getting wrecked. Or you basically perform some kind of man in the middle attack, say a car is one place when it's actually somewhere else, cause accidents. It's just, excuse the pun, an accident waiting to happen. So if that is something that someone tries to push, I don't know, that seems like something Elon might try to do. I don't know. But I would have some serious reservations about signing up for that, and I will absolutely like to keep my cars that I drive myself, because that is one thing that I think I've made kind of clear on the podcast that I do enjoy doing. I do enjoy driving. Of course, not driving in traffic. Traffic is the most horrible thing ever. I do not enjoy that at all. That is just terrible. Which I guess that would be maybe one nice thing about going back to adaptive cruise control. If you're just constantly having to deal with traffic, that might potentially be a use case. I mean, I still wouldn't trust the system. I have trust issues with software like that because I write software for a living and I know software is just riddled with bugs. So I just generally don't trust things like that. That's why I don't have like any kind of like smart locks or anything like that, which the funny thing about that is like if you ask a locksmith, they would probably be more likely to have. Well, I actually don't know this. I'm just making this up. But they might be more likely to have smart locks because they know how easy it is to lockpick a standard lock and break into your house. Whereas a software engineer knows how easy it is to potentially break software and bypass, measures like that and get into your house. So it's kind of how your worldview can like I guess impact that. Um, but yeah, so driving is fun. I enjoy it, especially when it's those scenarios where I'm either the only person on the road or there aren't many other people on the road, and I can just enjoy the drive and don't have to worry about constantly making sure some dumb driver isn't doing something dumb. Because if you've driven in the US before, that is unfortunately a very common occurrence to see. And I guess I'll just leave my car rant at this. If you are passing someone in the right lane doing the speed limit, we have a problem. uh, if someone is in the passing lane, aka the left lane, and you are passing them in the right lane, either doing the speed limit or less than the speed limit, we have a serious problem. But that's just the pure goody two shoes example. The fact of the matter is, you should only be in the left lane if you are actively passing someone, or if like traffic's really bad and neither lane is actually moving, then it's kind of more understandable. But yeah, there are so many instances where I've seen cars just they've pitched their tent and everything. They're just camped there for the night. Like they are just hard set and being in that lane, even though they have absolutely no business being in that lane. Now, if we're being honest, I'm no sinless disciple of the left lane discipline myself. I mean, there have been times where I probably could have been in like the right lane, but I was still in the left lane. I think everyone does that. But the thing of it is, we have all seen those drivers where they are just in the left lane. They have no care in the world and they're just there for the long haul. And they have no desire to get over. Like you'll see them, especially in those cases where like you're both going about the same speed and you're like in the right lane and they're just in the left lane, and they're, maybe they're in front of you or maybe they're behind you by a, good number of car lengths. Maybe they're like, quarter mile up the road or something, or a quarter mile behind you. So there's obviously plenty of room between you. So there's no necessarily a reason for them to be in the left lane, but they just decide to stay there anyway. And I don't know. It always baffles me when I see instances like that happening. But that's just, I guess, bad lane discipline. That's not necessarily bad drivers. But there are also plenty of instances, I'm sure, people have seen of bad drivers. I mean, the number of times where I've seen someone bomb it down like the emergency, like pull-off lane because they don't feel like waiting in traffic is more than the number should be zero, but I've obviously seen many in my day. There was vividly one time I remember very clearly. I was sitting in traffic, and there were, within the span of maybe like 5 minutes, there was like 4 cars that all like bombed it down the emergency lane. Very, it's kind of shameful, but yeah, this is why we can't have nice things, I guess. Why we can't have an autobahn here in the U.S. But yeah, so it's in cases like that where like if there is really nobody on the road, then it's driving's a lot more fun. But when there are more people on the road, the higher likelihood that there's going to be someone on the road that isn't doing things that they probably should be doing and acting in ways that they probably shouldn't, and you have to just kind of be more alert about it, and it just kind of takes the fun out of it. Plus, just sitting in traffic's no fun, right? So yeah, so that was I guess a far tangent from where we started this out at. But I will, I guess, to summarize the initial point, I am much more of a fan of the dumb cruise control than the adaptive cruise control, because at least with the dumb cruise control, I don't have to be finicky with the cruise control and kind of monitor my speed to know when I need to get over. I can just do the eye test. Oh yeah, I'm gaining on this person. Let me get over so I can pass them. But yeah, so I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this week's episode. But before we go, let's get back to our trivia question for the week. So this week's trivia question is: the first device to use Apple Silicon was the iPad back in 2010, followed by the iPhone 4. But what was the name of the chip in those devices? So what was the name of the Apple Silicon chip in the iPad and iPhone 4 from 2010? If you said the A4 chip, congratulations, you got this week's trivia question correct. And that's going to do it for this episode. So if you enjoyed it, definitely be sure to leave it a rating and review, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And be sure to share it around with friends and family members. And if you have any questions about this week's episode, or you have any topics or ideas for future episodes, definitely shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com. Or if you're on YouTube, you can just leave a comment down below. And that's going to do it for me in this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Until next time, my fellow assassins, remember, bull nothing equals true. If action not equal to null, return true. I'll see you next time on the Dark Assassins podcast.